Hello, my name is Jake. I'm 28. I work nights at a small independent bookstore downtown, shelving returns and processing online orders while the city sleeps around me. It's quiet work that suits me fine, though it means my schedule runs opposite to most of the world. When people are heading to bed, I'm brewing my first cup of coffee. When they're starting their morning routines, I'm finally winding down. I share a cramped two-bedroom apartment with my roommate Chris, who works a standard 9 to 5 at an insurance company. We've been living together for almost 2 years now, ever since I moved to the city and needed somewhere affordable. Chris is easygoing, the kind of guy who leaves notes about whose turn it is to buy milk and never complains when I accidentally wake him coming home at dawn. He's got this steady, predictable life that I sometimes envy, complete with a girlfriend he's been with since college and weekend plans that involve things like farmers markets and hiking trails. The thing about working nights is that you exist in the margins of other people's lives. You see the city when it's honest, when the pretense drops away, and only the essential remains. The bookstore becomes my world during those overnight hours, filled with the smell of old paper and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. I know every creak in the floorboards, every book that's been misshelved, every customer who comes in during those strange hours when most people are dreaming. But it also means that sometimes when I get home, the apartment feels like a museum of someone else's life. Chris's dishes in the sink from dinner I didn't share, his jacket thrown over the chair from plan I wasn't part of. Not that I mind exactly. I chose this schedule, chose this life of existing in the spaces between other people's days. It was a Thursday morning in October when everything changed, though I didn't know it at the time. I'd gotten home later than usual because we'd had a delivery of new releases that needed to be logged and shelved. The apartment was quiet, Chris already gone to work, leaving behind the lingering smell of coffee and toast. I was in the kitchen making myself a sandwich, thinking about whether I had the energy to read for a while before sleeping, when I heard a key in the front door. This wasn't unusual. Chris sometimes came back if he'd forgotten something, though it seemed early even for that. But when the door opened, it wasn't Chris who walked in. It was a woman I'd never seen before, carrying a large duffel bag and looking around the apartment with the casual familiarity of someone who belonged there. She was maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, and wearing jeans and an oversized sweater that looked like it had seen better days. There was something about her face, the shape of her eyes and the way she held her mouth, that reminded me of Chris, though she was clearly older and carried herself with a different kind of confidence. "Oh," she said when she saw me standing in the kitchen doorway with half a sandwich in my hand. "You must be Jake. Chris told me about you." I nodded, suddenly aware that I probably looked exactly like what I was. Someone who just finished an 8-hour shift and was running on too much coffee and not enough sleep. "And you are?" "Emma, Chris's sister." She dropped her bag by the door and shrugged out of her jacket. "I hope you don't mind me crashing here for a while. I tried calling Chris this morning, but I guess he was already at work." I'd heard Chris mention his sister before, usually in the context of family stories or holiday plans, but I'd never met her. She lived in Portland, I thought, or maybe Seattle, somewhere on the West Coast, working in graphic design or web development or something creative that required her to freelance and move around a lot. "No problem," I said, though I wondered what a while meant and why she'd shown up unannounced. "Chris should be home around 6 if you want to wait for him." She smiled, and I could see the family resemblance more clearly then. "Actually, I was hoping to surprise him. I've got some news I wanted to share in person." She looked around the apartment again, taking in the mismatched furniture and the stack of books I'd left on the coffee table. "This is nice. Cozy." It wasn't really. The apartment was functional at best, with thin walls and a radiator that clanked all winter, but I appreciated her diplomacy. "Can I get you some coffee or something? I was just about to make a pot." "That would be great. Actually, I've been driving since yesterday evening." While I busied myself with the coffee maker, Emma settled onto the couch, tucking her legs under her in a way that made her look younger than 30. She had this energy about her, like she was always thinking about 3 different things at once, but also like she was completely present in whatever moment she found herself in. So, you work nights? She said. It wasn't a question. At a bookstore downtown, mostly inventory and online orders. Nothing too exciting. I bet it's peaceful, though. I've always thought there'd be something appealing about having the world to yourself for a few hours. I handed her a mug and kept one for myself, even though coffee was probably the last thing I needed if I wanted to sleep anytime soon. It has its advantages, fewer people, for one thing. She laughed. Not a people person? More like I prefer people in small doses. We talked easily while we drank our coffee, the kind of conversation that happens between strangers who immediately recognize something familiar in each other. She told me about her drive from Portland, about the small town she'd stopped in, and the diner where she'd had breakfast that morning. I told her about the bookstore, about the regular customers who came in during the overnight hours, the insomniac professor who special ordered obscure philosophy text, the night shift nurse who had a weakness for romance novels. What's the strangest thing that's ever happened during one of your shifts? She asked. I thought about it. Last month, this guy came in looking for a book about beekeeping. Not just any book, but a specific one his grandfather had owned. And he had this whole story about how he'd inherited these hives but didn't know what to do with them. We spent 2 hours going through every beekeeping book in the store and finally found the one he was looking for in our rare books section. Did he buy it? He did, and he invited me to come see the hive sometime, which I thought was sweet, even though I'm probably never going to take him up on it. Emma smiled. You should, though. When's the last time you did something that scared you a little? It was a good question, and one I didn't have a ready answer for. My life had settled into comfortable routines, predictable patterns that didn't require much risk or uncertainty. Work, home, books, sleep, repeat. I should probably let you get some rest, Emma said, finishing her coffee. Chris mentioned you work nights, so you're probably exhausted. I'm okay for a while longer. Besides, it's nice having someone to talk to. The apartment's usually pretty quiet during the day. What about Chris? Don't you two hang out? Different schedules, I said. We're like ships passing in the night most of the time. He's getting ready for bed when I'm heading to work, and I'm going to sleep when he's starting his day. Emma nodded thoughtfully. That must get lonely. I'd never really thought about it in those terms before, but she was right. It did get lonely sometimes, existing in the margins of other people's lives, always slightly out of sync with the rest of the world. What about you, I asked, why it brings you to town? Her expression shifted slightly, becoming more serious. I got a job offer here in the city. It's a good opportunity, the kind I've been working toward for years, but it would mean leaving Portland, leaving everything I've built there. That's big news. Yeah, I wanted to talk to Chris about it, get his perspective. He's always been good at helping me think through major decisions. There was something in her voice that suggested the decision was more complicated than she was letting on, but I didn't push. But up ahead, point. We just met, after all, and everyone's entitled to their private struggles. She yawned then, covering her mouth with the back of her hand. Okay, now I really should let you sleep, and I should probably try to get a few hours myself before Chris gets home. You can take my room if you want. I usually sleep on the couch anyway when I'm too tired to make it to bed. Are you sure? I don't want to put you out. It's no problem, really. She gathered her things and headed toward my room, pausing at the doorway. Thanks, Jake, for the coffee and the conversation. It's been really nice. After she disappeared into my room, I settled onto the couch with a book, but found myself reading the same paragraph over and over without absorbing any of it. There was something about Emma that had unsettled me, though not in an unpleasant way. Maybe it was just the novelty of having someone new in the apartment, someone who existed outside the careful routines Chris and I had established. Or maybe it was the way she looked at me when she asked about the last time I'd done something that scared me, like she could see right through the comfortable walls I'd built around my life. I must have dozed off eventually because the next thing I knew, Chris was shaking my shoulder gently. Hey, man, Emma said you let her crash in your room. That was really cool of you. I sat up, disoriented. The light coming through the windows had that golden quality of late afternoon, and I could hear voices from the kitchen, Chris and Emma talking in the animated way siblings do when they haven't seen each other in a while. No problem. How long was I out? A few hours. Emma's been up for a while making dinner. She insisted, said it was the least she could do. The smell of something savory drifted from the kitchen, garlic and herbs and something else I couldn't identify. My stomach reminded me that I'd only eaten half a sandwich since getting home from work. She seems nice, I said. She is, and she's going through some stuff right now, so I'm glad she felt comfortable coming here. Chris lowered his voice. Did she mention anything to you about a job? A little something about an opportunity here in the city? Chris nodded. It's complicated. The job is perfect for her, but she'd be leaving behind this guy she's been seeing in Portland. They've been together about a year, and I think she's really torn about what to do. That explained the serious expression she'd had when talking about the decision. It wasn't just about career and location. It was about love and the messy calculations we all make when trying to balance what we want with what we think we should want. What do you think she'll do? I don't know. Emma's always been the type to follow her heart, but she's also practical. She knows a good opportunity when she sees one. Chris stretched and headed toward the kitchen. Come on, let's see what she's cooking. I'm starving. Dinner was simple but perfect. Pasta with a sauce Emma had improvised from whatever she'd found in our poorly stocked pantry. We ate at the small table by the window, and I found myself watching the way she gestured when she talked, the way she listened to Chris's stories about work with genuine interest, the way she asked questions that showed she was really paying attention. So what's Portland like? I asked during a lull in the conversation. Rainy, Emma said, smiling, but in a good way. Everything's green, and there are mountains everywhere, and the coffee is incredible. The creative community is amazing too. I've got this studio space I share with 3 other designers, and we're always collaborating on projects, bouncing ideas off each other. Sounds like a good life. It is, or it has been. She twirled pasta around her fork thoughtfully. But sometimes I think I've gotten too comfortable there, too settled into routines that feel safe, but maybe aren't pushing me to grow. Chris leaned back in his chair. Since when is being settled a bad thing? It's not, necessarily. But this job offer, it's like with a company that it works with major clients, the kind of projects I've always dreamed about being part of. In Portland, I'm mostly doing local stuff, small businesses, nonprofits, important work, but not necessarily challenging work. What does David think about it? Chris asked, and I assumed David must be the boyfriend she'd mentioned. Emma's expression tightened slightly. David thinks I should stay. He's got his practice established there, his whole life built around the city. He doesn't understand why I wanted to leave something good for something uncertain. But you're not sure it's good enough, I said. And both Chris and Emma looked at me with surprise. I hadn't meant to speak, but the words had come out anyway. Exactly, Emma said quietly. How did you know that? I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. I guess I recognize the feeling, the sense that you're living a perfectly fine life that doesn't quite fit. Chris looked between us with curiosity. Is that how you feel about working nights? Sometimes. I mean, I like the work and I like the schedule in a lot of ways, but sometimes I wonder if I'm hiding behind it. You know, using it as an excuse to avoid the messier parts of life. Emma nodded. The parts that require you to be vulnerable with other people, right? We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of these admissions settling around us. It's strange how sometimes you can know someone for years without having these kinds of conversations. And other times you can meet someone new and immediately find yourself talking about things you barely admit to yourself. After dinner, Chris suggested we watch a movie, but Emma begged off, saying she wanted to take a walk and think. Chris offered to go with her, but she said she preferred to be alone. I understood that impulse, the need to process thoughts in solitude, to let your mind wander without having to explain yourself to anyone else. I'll probably be back late, she said, pulling on her jacket. Don't wait up. After she left, Chris and I settled in front of the television, but neither of us was really paying attention to whatever was on the screen. She's different than I expected, I said. Different? How? I don't know, more thoughtful, I guess, more aware of things. Chris smiled. Emma's always been like that. Even when we were kids, she was the one asking the questions that made adults uncomfortable. You know, like why people stayed in jobs they hated, or why everyone pretended to be happy at family gatherings when you could tell they weren't. That must have made things interesting. It did. My parents never quite knew what to do with her. They're very practical people, very focused on security and stability. Emma's always been more concerned with meaning and authenticity. I could see that in her, the way she'd asked about my work, about the last time I'd done something that scared me. She had this quality of attention that made you feel like your answers mattered, like she was genuinely curious about how other people navigated the world. Do you think she'll take the job? Chris was quiet for a long moment. I hope she does. I think she needs to. But I also know it's not that simple when you love someone. Is she in love with this guy? I think she thinks she is, but I also think she's scared of being alone. And sometimes that can look a lot like love. It was a wise observation, the kind that comes from knowing someone well enough to see past what they say to what they actually mean. I wondered what Chris would say about my own life if I asked him, what patterns he'd noticed that I was too close to see clearly. Emma didn't come back until after midnight. I was in my room by then, reading and trying to wind down from the day, when I heard her key in the door. She moved quietly through the apartment, and I heard the soft sound of the couch springs as she settled in for the night. I lay there for a while, thinking about our conversation at dinner, about the questions she'd asked, and the way she'd looked at me when I talked about hiding behind my schedule. There was something about her presence that made me more aware of my own life, like she was holding up a mirror that reflected not just what I was doing, but what I wasn't doing. The next morning, I woke up later than usual to the sound of quiet conversation from the kitchen, Emma and Chris talking over coffee. I could hear the serious tone of their voices, though I couldn't make out the words. When I emerged from my room, they both looked up with expressions that suggested they'd been discussing something important. "Morning," Emma said. "I made coffee if you want some." "Thanks." I poured myself a mug and joined them at the table. "How was your walk last night?" "Good," clarifying. She looked tired but more settled than she had the day before. "I think I've made a decision about the job." Chris leaned forward slightly. "Yeah? I'm going to take it. I called them this morning and accepted the offer." "Emma, that's great," Chris said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "I'm proud of you." "What about David?" I asked. Emma's smile faltered slightly. "That's more complicated. I called him too. Told him about my decision. He wasn't thrilled." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I think maybe we both knew this was coming. We want different things, different kinds of lives. That doesn't make either of us wrong, just incompatible." There was sadness in her voice, but also something like relief, the kind that comes from finally making a decision you have been avoiding, even when it's painful. "When do you start?" Chris asked. 2 weeks, which means I need to get back to Portland, pack up my life, and figure out where I'm going to live here." "You can stay here as long as you need to," Chris said immediately. "Right, Jake?" I nodded. "Of course." "That's really generous, but I don't want to impose. I was thinking maybe I could find a sublet or something temporary while I look for a permanent place." "Seriously, it's no problem," I said. "The couch is comfortable, and it might be nice to have someone around during the day. The apartment gets pretty quiet." Emma looked at me with that same direct attention she'd had the day before. "Are you sure? I don't want to disrupt your routine." "Maybe my routine could use a little disrupting." She smiled, the first genuinely happy smile I'd seen from her since she'd arrived. "In that case, I'd love to stay, at least until I get settled." The next few days passed quickly. Emma drove back to Portland to pack and tie up loose ends, while Chris and I fell back into our usual rhythm of ships passing in the night. But something had shifted in the apartment's atmosphere, a sense of anticipation that hadn't been there before. Chris was excited about having his sister nearby, and I found myself looking forward to her return in a way that surprised me. She came back the following Thursday, this time with a small moving truck and everything she owned packed into boxes and bags. Chris took the day off work to help her move in, and I rearranged my schedule so I could be there too. "This is it," she said, standing in the living room, surrounded by her belongings. "My entire life in Portland reduced to 15 boxes and 3 suitcases." "It's not reduced," Chris said. "It's concentrated. All the important stuff, right?" "All the important stuff." She looked around the apartment with fresh eyes. I can't believe I'm actually doing this. Having second thoughts? I asked. No, well, maybe a few, but the good kind. You know, the kind that means you're doing something that matters. Over the next few hours, we helped her unpack and find places for her things. She didn't have much furniture, just some books, clothes, art supplies, and a few pieces that clearly held sentimental value. A vintage camera that had belonged to her grandfather, a small painting that she'd bought from a street artist in Prague, a wooden box full of letters and photographs. What's in there? Chris asked, nodding toward the box. Memories, Emma said simply. Things I couldn't bear to throw away, but don't necessarily need to look at every day. I understood that impulse, the desire to keep pieces of your past close without letting them dominate your present. I had my own collection of meaningful objects tucked away in drawers and closets, things that connected me to earlier versions of myself. By evening, Emma was more or less settled in. Her clothes hung in the hall closet, her books mixed in with hours on the shelves, her laptop set up on the kitchen table where she planned to work until she found an office or studio space. This feels surreal, she said over the pizza we'd ordered for dinner. Yesterday I was in Portland, and now I'm here, about to start a completely new life. How does it feel, I asked. Terrifying, exciting, like I'm finally doing something I should have done years ago. Any regrets about David? She considered the question carefully. Sadness, but not regrets. We had a good year together, but we were never going to want the same things long term. Better to acknowledge that now than to spend years trying to make something work that was never quite right. After Chris went to bed, Emma and I stayed up talking. It was the first time we'd really been alone together since that first morning, and I found myself curious about her in ways I hadn't expected. What's the new job like? I asked. It's with a design firm that works with tech companies mostly, but also some nonprofits and cultural organizations. The kind of work where you get to solve interesting problems and hopefully make things a little more beautiful in the process. That sounds perfect for you. I hope so. I start soon, so I guess we'll find out soon enough. We were sitting on the couch and I was acutely aware of her presence beside me, the way she tucked her legs under her when she got comfortable, the way she gestured with her hands when she talked about something she cared about. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why do you work nights? I mean, really. Chris said you've been doing it for years, but it seems like such an isolating way to live. It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself more often since she'd arrived. I guess I started because it was the only job I could get when I moved here. But I kept doing it because I liked the solitude, the sense of having my own world separate from everyone else's. And now I'm not so sure. Maybe I've been hiding behind it. Like I said the other night, using it as an excuse to avoid getting too involved in other people's lives. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I did something similar in Portland, not with work, but with David. I think I stayed with him longer than I should have because it felt safer than being alone, trying to figure out what I actually wanted. What do you want? She was quiet for a long moment, considering. I want to do work that matters. I want to be around people who challenge me to be better than I am. I want to feel like I'm living my life instead of just getting through it. Those are good things to want. What about you? What do you want? It was my turn to be quiet. I'd gotten so used to thinking about my life in terms of what I didn't want, what I was avoiding, that I'd almost forgotten to consider what I might actually be seeking. I think I want what you said, to feel like I'm living instead of just getting through, to be around people who see me clearly and like what they see anyway. Emma smiled. That's beautiful. We talked late into the morning about books and travel and the small moments that stick with you long after the big events fade. She told me about a summer she'd spent in Italy, working on a farm and learning to make cheese. Told her about the night shift regular who came in every Tuesday to read poetry aloud to himself in the philosophy section. I should let you get some sleep, she said finally. Don't you have to work tonight? Yeah, but I'm okay. This has been nice. It has. Thank you for letting me stay here, Jake. And not just the practical stuff. Thank you for making me feel welcome. Thank you for disrupting my routine. She laughed. I haven't even started yet. Emma's first week at her new job was a whirlwind of meetings and orientations and learning new systems. She'd leave in the morning before I got home from work and return in the evening just as I was getting ready to head out. We'd pass each other in the hallway or kitchen, exchanging brief updates and tired smiles. "How's it going?" I'd ask. "Good. Overwhelming, but good. The people seem great, and the projects are exactly what I hoped they'd be." "That's wonderful. How was your night?" "Quiet. A philosophy professor came in looking for a book about the nature of time. We had a long conversation about whether the present moment actually exists." "Did you reach any conclusions?" "Only that 3 in the morning is probably not the best time for metaphysical debates." These brief exchanges became the highlight of my day, something I looked forward to during the long hours at the bookstore. There was something about Emma's presence in the apartment that made it feel more alive, more like a home instead of just a place where Chris and I happened to sleep and keep our things. On Friday night, I came home to find Emma and Chris in the kitchen, cooking dinner together and laughing about something that had happened at Chris's office. They had the easy intimacy of siblings who genuinely like each other, and watching them made me think about my own family, scattered across the country and connected mostly through holiday phone calls and birthday cards. "Jake," Emma called when she saw me. "Perfect timing. We're making way too much food." "I don't want to intrude on sibling time." "Don't be ridiculous," Chris said. "Besides, Emma's been asking about your bookstore stories all week. I think she's developing a crush on your philosophy professor." Emma threw a dish towel at him. "I am not. I'm just fascinated by people who have deep thoughts about the nature of reality at 3 in the morning." "Aren't we all?" I said, accepting the plate of food Emma handed me. Dinner was relaxed and comfortable. The three of us fell into an easy rhythm of conversation that felt natural despite how new it was. Emma told us about her colleagues and the project she'd been assigned, redesigning the website for a small museum. Chris shared office gossip and complained about his boss's tendency to schedule meetings right before lunch. "What about you?" Emma asked me. "Any interesting customers this week?" "Actually, yes. This woman came in Wednesday night looking for cookbooks, but not just any cookbooks. She wanted ones that had been written by people who'd learned to cook out of necessity rather than passion. She had this theory that the best recipes come from people who had to figure out how to make something delicious with whatever they had on hand." "That's a beautiful theory," Emma said. "Did you find anything for her?" "We did. This memoir by a woman who'd grown up during the Depression and a cookbook by a refugee who'd recreated her grandmother's recipes from memory after fleeing her home country." "I love that your job puts you in touch with people like that," Emma said. "People with interesting theories about the world. It's one of the things I like best about working nights. The people who are out at those hours, they're often there because they can't sleep, because they are thinking about something too important to ignore. They're more likely to have real conversations as opposed to fake ones, as opposed to the kind of small talk that fills up space without actually communicating anything." Emma nodded. "I know what you mean. It's like the difference between talking and actually saying something." After dinner, Chris announced he was going out to meet his girlfriend and some friends at a bar downtown. "You two should come," he said. "It'll be fun." Emma looked at me questioningly. "What do you think?" I was tempted, but also aware that I'd need to leave for work in a few hours and probably shouldn't start drinking. "You should go," I said. "I need to get some sleep before my shift." "Are you sure? I don't want to abandon you on a Friday night." "I'm sure. Besides, you should meet Chris's friends. They're good people." After they left, I tried to read for a while, but found myself restless in a way that was becoming familiar. Emma's presence in the apartment had awakened something in me, a dissatisfaction with the careful boundaries I'd built around my life. For the first time in years, I was questioning whether the solitude I'd cultivated was actually serving me or just protecting me from the possibility of disappointment. I was still thinking about this when I left for work, and the question followed me through my shift. The bookstore felt smaller than usual, more confining, and I found myself watching the clock and counting hours until I could go home. When I got back Saturday morning, the apartment was quiet. Chris's door was closed, and Emma was asleep on the couch, still wearing the clothes she'd gone out in the night before. There was something vulnerable about seeing her like that, curled up under the throw blanket, with her hair falling across her face. I made coffee as quietly as I could and settled at the kitchen table with a book, but found myself glancing toward the living room more often than I was reading. When Emma finally stirred, she looked disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. Morning, she said, sitting up and pushing her hair back from her face. Sorry, I meant to make it to my actual bed last night, but I guess I was more tired than I thought. How was it? Fun. Chris's friends are great, very welcoming. We went to this little place with live music, and there was this singer who did the most beautiful covers of songs I'd forgotten I loved. She stretched and looked toward the kitchen. Is that coffee I smell? Help yourself. I made plenty. She padded to the kitchen and poured herself a mug, then joined me at the table. She looked softer in the morning light, more relaxed than I'd seen her since she'd arrived. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Last night, when Chris's friends were asking about what I do for work, I realized I was excited to talk about it in a way I haven't been in years. Like I was finally doing something worth explaining to people. That's a good feeling. It is. But it also made me think about what you said about hiding behind your schedule. I think I've been doing something similar, but in reverse. I've been so focused on building this perfect life in Portland that I forgot to pay attention to whether it was actually making me happy. And now I feel like I'm finally paying attention to what I want, to what makes me feel at ease, to the people around me who matter. There was something in the way she said this last part, looking directly at me, that made me think she might be including me in that category of people who mattered. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. I'm glad you took the guau, I said. Me too, even though it is scary, especially because it's scary. She smiled. Exactly. We spent the rest of the morning talking over coffee, and I found myself telling her things I'd never shared with anyone. About the novel I'd been writing in fragments for years, but never had the courage to finish. About the way I sometimes felt like I was watching my life from the outside instead of actually living it. About the fear that I'd become so comfortable with solitude that I'd forgotten how to be close to another person. What's the novel about? She asked. A man who works the night shift at a radio station in a small town, taking calls from insomniacs and people driving through on long road trips. It's about the connections we make with strangers, the way people reveal themselves when they think no one's really listening. That sounds beautiful and very you. I don't know if I'll ever finish it. Why not? It was a simple question, but one I'd been avoiding asking myself. I guess I'm afraid it won't be good enough, or that finishing it would mean I'd have to decide what to do with it, whether to try to get it published or just keep it as a private thing. What if it doesn't have to be perfect? What if it just has to be finished? Is that how you approach your design work? Not always, but I'm learning to. Perfectionism is just fear disguised as high standards, you know? It keeps you from putting anything real into the world. I thought about this as I got ready for work that evening. Emma's words echoed in my head as I walked through the quiet streets to the bookstore, and I found myself looking at the city differently, noticing details I'd stopped seeing after years of making the same journey. The night shift felt different too. Instead of losing myself in the familiar routines of shelving and organizing, I found myself paying attention to the customers who came in, really listening to their stories and questions. The philosophy professor was there again, this time looking for books about the concept of home, and we ended up having a long conversation about whether place or people matter more in creating a sense of belonging. I think it's about finding the right combination, I told him. A place that allows you to be yourself with people who see and appreciate who you really are. That's wise, he said. Have you found that combination? I think I might be starting to. When I got home Sunday morning, Emma was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of coffee working on something that had her completely absorbed. Morning, I said softly, not wanting to break her concentration. She looked up and smiled. Hey, how was work? Different. Good different. What made it different? I thought about how to explain it. I think I was more present, if that makes sense. More engaged with what was happening around me instead of just going through the motions. Dude, that's wonderful. What changed? I think you changed something. Having you here talking to you about things that matter, it's made me more aware of my own life. Emma saved whatever she was working on and closed her laptop. Can I tell you something? Always. I've been thinking about what you said about feeling like you're watching your life from the outside. I used to feel that way too, especially in Portland. Like I was playing a role in someone else's idea of what my life should look like. And now I feel like I'm finally living my own life. And part of that is because of you, because of the way you listen and ask questions that make me think more clearly about what I actually want. We looked at each other across the kitchen table, and I felt something shift between us, a recognition of mutual influence and growing affection that had been building since the day she'd arrived. Emma, I started to say, but she held up her hand. I know this is complicated. I just got out of a relationship. I'm living on your couch. I'm your roommate's sister. But I also know that I feel more like myself when I'm talking to you than I have in a very long time. I feel the same way. So what do we do with that? It was a good question, and one I didn't have an easy answer for. I don't know, but I'd like to find out. She smiled. Me too. The next few weeks passed in a blur of new routines and growing intimacy. Emma settled into her job and began looking for her own apartment, though she seemed to be taking her time about it. Chris was oblivious to the tension building between Emma and me, or if he noticed, he was politely ignoring it. Emma and I began staying up later and later when I got home from work, talking about everything and nothing, sharing books and music and stories from our days. She started bringing home takeout from restaurants near her office, and we'd eat together at the kitchen table while Chris slept, creating our own private world in the margins of the night. "I've found a place I might want to look at," she said one Thursday morning, showing me a listing on her phone. "It's a studio in the Arts District, not far from my office." I looked at the photos of exposed brick walls and large windows, the kind of space that would suit her perfectly. "It looks great." "You don't sound very enthusiastic." "I am. I want you to find a place that makes you happy, but, but I'll miss having you here. I'll miss our late night conversations and the way the apartment feels more alive with you in it." Emma set down her phone and looked at me seriously. "Jake, what are we doing here?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, we're acting like we're in a relationship without actually being in one. We talk for hours, we share meals. We've created these intimate routines, but we haven't acknowledged what's happening between us." She was right, of course. We had been dancing around our feelings for weeks, both of us aware of the attraction, but neither willing to name it directly. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Of what?" "Of ruining what we have, of making things complicated with Chris, of you realizing that I'm not actually as interesting as I seem during these late-night conversations." Emma reached across the table and took my hand. "Jake, you are exactly as interesting as you seem. More so, actually. And yes, it might be complicated with Chris, but he loves both of us and wants us to be happy. What about the fact that you just got out of a relationship? What about it? I'm not rebounding if that's what you're worried about. Boishabel. What I feel for you is completely different from what I felt for David. It's deeper and more honest and scarier in all the best ways." I looked at her hands, her fingers intertwined with mine, and felt something settle into place that I hadn't even realized was unsettled. "I care about you," I said, "more than I've cared about anyone in a very long time." "I care about you too." "So what happens now?" Emma smiled. "Now we stop pretending that we're just friends and see what happens when we're honest about what we want." "And what do you want?" "I want to keep having these conversations. I want to know what happens when you finish your novel. I want to find out what it's like to be with someone who sees me clearly and likes what he sees. I want those things too." "Then let's try. Let's be brave enough to see what this could become." That night, instead of going to work, I called in sick for the first time in months. Emma and I spent the evening walking through the city, talking and laughing, and discovering that the connection we'd built over late-night kitchen table conversations translated perfectly to the wider world. We went to a small restaurant she'd been wanting to try, then to a bookstore that stayed open late, browsing the shelves and reading passages aloud to each other. It felt like a first date and a homecoming all at once, the thrill of something new combined with the comfort of deep familiarity. "I have a confession," Emma said as we walked home through the quiet streets. "What's that?" "I've been putting off looking for an apartment because I didn't want to leave. Not the apartment specifically, but this thing we've been building together. I'm glad you told me. I was wondering if I was imagining the reluctance. You weren't imagining it. I've been scared too, scared of wanting something that might not work out. And now I think maybe it's worth the risk. When we got back to the apartment, Chris was waiting in the living room with a knowing smile. So, he said, are you two finally going to admit that you're crazy about each other? Emma and I looked at each other and burst out laughing. Was it that obvious? I asked. Only to everyone except you two. I've been waiting for weeks for you to figure it out. Are you okay with it? Emma asked. It won't make things weird? Chris stood up and hugged his sister, then me. Are you kidding? I love you both, and I can see how happy you make each other. Why would I have a problem with that? What if it doesn't work out? What if it does? That night, Emma didn't sleep on the couch. We stayed up until dawn, talking and kissing, and marveling at how natural it felt to finally acknowledge what had been building between us for weeks. When I called in sick to work again the next night, my manager was understanding in a way that suggested he'd been wondering when I was going to start living more fully outside the bookstore. Take the weekend, he said. You've got plenty of vacation time saved up. Emma had already requested Friday off, and we spent the long weekend exploring the city together, visiting museums and markets and neighborhoods I'd never taken the time to see, despite living there for years. I can't believe you've never been to the art museum, Emma said as we wandered through galleries filled with paintings and sculptures. I always meant to, I just never seemed to find the time. What did you do with your free time before? Read mostly, watched movies, walked around the neighborhood alone, always alone. Emma stopped in front of a painting of a woman sitting by a window, looking out at a garden. Do you miss it, the solitude? I considered the question carefully. I miss some aspects of it, the peace, the ability to think without distraction. But I don't miss the loneliness, and I don't miss feeling like I was just passing through my own life. I understand that feeling. In Portland, I had this beautiful life that looked perfect from the outside, but I always felt like I was performing it rather than living it. And now I feel like I'm finally awake. We spent hours in the museum, talking about the art and about ourselves, discovering new layers of compatibility and attraction. Emma had this way of looking at paintings that made me see them differently, pointing out details and connections I would have missed on my own. You should write about this, she said as we sat in the museum cafe, sharing a piece of chocolate cake. About what? About the way art changes when you look at it with someone else, about how sharing an experience transforms it into something new. Is that what's happening with us? I think so. I think we're creating something together that's different from what either of us could create alone. That evening, back at the apartment, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not the novel I'd been working on for years, but something new, something inspired by the weekend Emma and I had shared. The words came easily, flowing in a way they hadn't in months. Emma read over my shoulder as I typed, occasionally suggesting a different word or phrase, her presence both inspiring and comforting. This is beautiful, she said when I finished the first section. You should submit it somewhere. It's not finished. It doesn't have to be finished to be good, and it doesn't have to be perfect to be worth sharing. I thought about what she'd said about perfectionism being fear disguised as high standards, and realized she was right. I'd been using the excuse of wanting to make my writing perfect to avoid the vulnerability of letting anyone else read it. Will you help me? I asked. Help you what? Finish this and maybe finish the novel too. Not write it for me, but be there while I write it. Ask questions, give feedback, remind me that it doesn't have to be perfect to be worthwhile. Emma smiled. I'd love that, but only if you'll do the same for me with my design work. I've been thinking about starting a freelance practice on the side, working with smaller clients who need more personal attention. Deal. We shook hands formally, then dissolved into laughter at the absurdity of making a business agreement while sitting in our pajamas at the kitchen table. Over the next few months, our lives began to interweave in ways that felt both natural and transformative. I reduced my hours at the bookstore, working only 4 nights a week instead of 5, and used the extra time to write and to be with Emma. She found a small studio apartment in the Arts District, but kept most of her things at our place, creating a flexible arrangement that gave her independence while allowing us to spend most of our time together. We established new routines that accommodated both of our schedules and temperaments. Emma would work late on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, giving me time to write while she was at the office. I would sleep in on Saturday and Sunday mornings, while she went for long runs through the city, returning with coffee and pastries from a bakery she discovered near her studio. I never thought I was a routine person, Emma said one Sunday morning as we sat in bed with coffee and the newspaper spread between us. But I love our routines. They're different from the routines I had before, I said. Those were about avoiding unpredictability. These are about creating space for the things that matter. What's the difference? The old routines were about protection. These are about connection. Emma smiled and leaned over to kiss me. I love the way you think about things. I love the way you make me think about things. By spring, I had finished the novel I'd been working on for years and started a new one. Emma had launched her freelance practice and was already getting more clients than she could handle. We were both busier than we'd ever been, but also more fulfilled, as if finally acknowledging our feelings for each other had freed us to pursue our other dreams with more courage. I have news, Emma said one evening as I was getting ready for work. Good news or bad news? Good news, great news actually. The museum project I worked on got written up in a design magazine, and now I have 3 new clients who want to work with me. Emma, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. There's more. One of them is a small press that publishes literary fiction. They need a complete rebrand. And when I mentioned that my boyfriend was a writer, they asked if they could see some of your work. I stared at her. You told them about my writing? I hope that's okay. I was just so excited about your novel, and it came up naturally in conversation. What did you tell them? That you'd written this beautiful book about connection and isolation, and that you were exactly the kind of writer they should be publishing. I felt a familiar flutter of anxiety mixed with excitement. What if they don't like it? What if they do? It was the same question Chris had asked months earlier, and hearing it from Emma reminded me of how much had changed since then. I was no longer the person who worked nights to avoid the complications of other people's lives. I was someone who had learned to be vulnerable, to take risks, to believe that what I had to offer might be worth sharing. Okay, I said, let's find out. Really? Really, but you have to promise me something. What? That no matter what happens with the book, you won't let me retreat back into my old patterns, that you'll keep pushing me to be brave. Emma took my hands in hers. I promise, but only if you promise to do the same for me. Deal. That night at work, I found myself looking around the bookstore with different eyes. It was still a place I loved, still filled with stories and possibilities, but it no longer felt like a refuge from the world. It felt like one part of a life that had expanded to include so much more. The philosophy professor came in, as he did most weeks, and we fell into our usual conversation about books and ideas. You seem different lately, he observed as I helped him find a book about the nature of creativity. More present, somehow. I think I am more present. I've been learning to pay attention to my life instead of just living through it. That's a valuable skill. What prompted the change? I thought about how to answer. I met someone who helped me see that the things I was afraid of weren't as scary as the things I was missing by being afraid. He nodded thoughtfully. Love has a way of making philosophers of us all. Is that what this is? What do you think? I considered the question as I walked home through the quiet streets. Was this love? The way Emma's presence had transformed not just my daily routines, but my entire relationship with myself and the world around me. The way thinking about her made me want to be braver, kinder, more honest. The way our conversations had become the foundation upon which I was building a new understanding of what it meant to live fully. When I got home, Emma was asleep on the couch, surrounded by design sketches and fabric samples for a project she was working on. She looked peaceful and beautiful in the soft light from the kitchen, and I felt that familiar surge of gratitude for whatever series of coincidences had brought her into my life. I covered her with a blanket and made coffee, then settled at the kitchen table with my laptop to work on the new novel. But instead of fiction, I found myself writing about the real story, about the night shift worker who learned to live in daylight, about the woman who taught him that taking risk was just another word for hope. As the sun came up over the city Emma stirred and opened her eyes, smiling when she saw me at the table. "How long have you been writing?" she asked. "A couple of hours. I couldn't sleep." "Good writing or frustrated writing?" "Happy writing, I think. The kind that comes from having something worth saying." Emma got up and poured herself coffee, then came to stand behind my chair, reading over my shoulder. "This is about us," she said. "Is that okay?" "It's perfect. But you left out the part about how scared I was when I first got here. How I almost turned around and drove back to Portland 3 times on the way from the airport." "You were scared?" "Terrified. I was leaving everything familiar to chase something I wasn't sure I deserved." "And now?" Emma leaned down and kissed the top of my head. "Now I know that sometimes the things that scare us most are the things we need most." Is that going to be the moral of our story? I don't think our story needs a moral. I think it just needs to be true. Outside, the city was waking up, people beginning their daily routines, starting another day in lives that might or might not include the kind of connection Emma and I had found. I thought about all the late-night conversations that had brought us to this moment, all the small acts of courage that had allowed us to recognize and nurture what was growing between us. "Emma," I said. "Yeah, I love you." She was quiet for a moment, and I wondered if I'd spoken too soon, if the words carried more weight than our relationship could bear yet. "I love you too," she said finally. "I think I have for weeks, but I was afraid to say it." "What were you afraid of?" "That it was too soon, too intense, too much to ask of someone I'd only known for a few months. And now I think love isn't about timing or logic. It's about recognition, about finding someone who sees you clearly and chooses to stay anyway." I turned in my chair to face her fully. "Is that what we're doing? Choosing to stay? Every day, every conversation, every risk we take together, every time we choose honesty over safety." As Emma spoke, I realized that this was what I'd been searching for without knowing it during all those years of working alone in the night, all those careful routines designed to protect me from disappointment. I'd been looking for someone who would make the choice to stay, not just once, but over and over, someone who would see all the complicated, imperfect parts of who I was and decide they were worth the effort of understanding. "So what happens now?" I asked. Emma smiled, the same smile she'd given me that first morning when I'd offered to let her disrupt my routine. "Now we keep choosing each other. We finish your book. We build my business. We figure out how to make a life together that's big enough for both of our dreams." That sounds like a good plan. The best plans always do. Outside, the sun was fully up now, painting the kitchen in warm golden light. Somewhere across the city, people were starting their days, making coffee, checking their phones, beginning the small rituals that would carry them through another 24 hours. But here in our kitchen, with Emma's hand in mine, and the promise of everything we might build together stretching out before us, it felt like our day was just beginning. In the quiet margins of a city asleep, where the scent of old books and coffee lingers, Jake's story with Emma unfolds like a whisper in the night. A night shift worker at a bookstore, Jake lives in the shadows of others' routines, his world bound by solitude and stories. Emma, his roommate's sister, arrives unannounced, her presence a spark in the stillness. One morning as the city wakes, she notices him writing, sleepless, and whispers, "I hear you still awake." In that moment, a connection begins, pulling Jake from isolation into a shared dawn. Their late-night talks, filled with vulnerable truths, transform their lives, leading to love and a courage to chase dreams long buried. This story teaches us that life's deepest connections often bloom in the quiet moments when we dare to be seen. Jake's solitary nights reflect our own tendencies to hide behind routines, fearing the vulnerability of connection. Emma's arrival, her willingness to share her fears and dreams, shows that true intimacy requires courage, to disrupt the familiar, to speak honestly, to choose each other daily. Their journey from stolen conversations to a shared life reminds us that love isn't about grand gestures, but about presence, about recognizing someone's quiet struggles and staying anyway. It urges us to step out of our own margins, to embrace the risks that make us feel alive. Have you ever found connection in an unexpected moment or taken a risk that changed your life? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how you've embraced the courage to connect. If this tale of quiet nights and bold choices resonates, subscribe and hit the bell for more stories that inspire us to live fully, one honest moment at a time. Let's keep choosing connection together.